So first, let me welcome everybody here for another session for the Nonprofit Network. For those of you who have been here before, this is a collaboration that we have with the Goodwin College at Drexel University, being overseen by Ann Wilcombe, and with the Beecher Family Learning Center, with me, Kevin Williams. So this is the next session of next series of workshops that we're putting on for the Nonprofit Network. Today's topic is going to be record keeping for beginners. So today's speaker is going to be JT Thaza. I knew I was going to mess it up. I should have said it 3 times. I'm going to let JT tell you his name, but JT is going to be our speaker for today. And I made sure that I'm recording the session today, so there will be a recorded copy available for everybody at the end of the session. And JT is going to be nice enough to give us a copy of the presentation slides at the end as well. So without further ado, let me turn this over to JT.
Thanks, Kevin. Welcome, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is JT Thazdal. So Kevin almost got it right. A lot of people just call me JT for that exact reason. So today's session topic is going to be called Record Keeping for Beginners. And the whole concept of today's session is just to understand how we collect information, aka records, for our nonprofit, the various categories we collect it to, and the concept that we don't need an expensive program or computer software to track it. We could just use a simple tool such as Microsoft Excel. Just to tell you a little bit more about myself, let me just go to the next slide here. Here's just a big slide with a big photo of me. Just to introduce myself a little bit more. I call Drexel University my alma mater, both my undergraduate and my MBA. I did my undergrad in accounting, and I did my MBA in finance. My experience is actually mixed with both for-profit and nonprofit. I worked such companies such as BlackRock, DuPont, worked at Penn Medicine. I'm an adjunct professor at Drexel University, teaching both at the Goodwin College of Professional Studies as well as the LeBeau College of Business. And I currently work as a finance manager at Wharton, over there at UPenn. A little bit more about my teaching experience. I teach a few courses at the LeBeau College of Business, business consulting for nonprofits. That's what originally intrigued me to the world of nonprofits. I also serve as an adjunct faculty member at the Goodwin College of Professional Studies in the nonprofit management program. So what I learned in working for both for-profit and nonprofit organizations and institutions is that it's all about effectiveness, that the whole concept of a nonprofit is simply a tax status. And that one of the things that we need to do is it's all about achieving results, whether it means generating income from the for-profit side or, understanding the mission that we take on in the nonprofit world. So today's session just hopes to achieve the concept of collecting good data and records. So I will use that term interchangeably when, calling upon records and data, because it's essentially the same thing. Just to cover a little bit more about the session today, since we got the introduction out of the way and we're all best friends, we're going to kind of dive into the concept of data and records, what it actually means and how we can actually utilize it to make better choices for our nonprofit. We're going to take a look at financial management and what that actually means. We're going to take a look at software and our application options, in which that, even though that typically we believe that there's some, expensive options out there, there are also free resources out there for nonprofits and small businesses as well. So I want to kind of introduce some of those options here. And continuing along, we're going to take a look at how we can just utilize Microsoft Excel to achieve this same thing. So, in analyzing exactly what we could do with Microsoft Excel and just taking a look at an example template on just a simple Excel file that tracks various metrics and helps organize information. We're also going to take a look at some additional resources that we have for nonprofits, small businesses. And then we're going to take a look at an honest assessment of what your particular need might be for your respective nonprofit. Just assessing exactly what you need. We can all agree that nonprofits come in various sizes. You know, they have various levels of experience and years of experience. We're going to kind of take a look at what is the option best for you, depending on the criteria for the assessment. I do want to remind everyone that, you know, my contact information is at the end of the slide. So I know that, you know, the participants here might have very specific questions regarding their nonprofit. So, you know, just know that my contact information is at the end of the slide. So if you have a very specific question or concern or comment, I would love to chat with you about it after the session. So just to get started, so the concept of data, right? The concept of data and analytics is pretty much everywhere. That's like the big trend in the marketplace right now. But one of the things that we have to ask ourselves is, how do we turn data into information? Because the reason we collect data is to utilize it to help make better choices for our organization. So for a nonprofit, essentially, how do we take data points that we collect, whether it be financial, information on our volunteers, information on our donors, or just information on our operations itself, and just make better choices, right? So we know that data improves the whole concept of decision making, but also allows us to kind of be better financial stewards, which means that as nonprofits are funded by, you know, donations and grants, how do we effectively utilize those funds just to help our nonprofit out, both in the short term and long term? We use data for better stakeholder engagement. So this doesn't just, you know, include donors, employees, and those we serve, but it includes the whole entire community. Everybody that calls himself a stakeholder for a nonprofit is actually involved in this. So, you know, the collection of data is truly important. And last but not least, it's more efficient operations. I think this is when any organization can simply just make better choices on, you know, running their operations more efficiently. In the, you know, during the COVID pandemic, one of the things that we're understanding is that, you know, companies are asking to, you know, reduce budgets, whether in the form of just simple operating budgets or, you know, in the form of, you know, full-time employees and from a payroll standpoint. So one of the things that we want to do is kind of take a look at how efficient are we with some of our spending and how can we be more efficient within our operations. And the concept of collecting data and organizing data allows us to do just that. So when we talk about data and record types for nonprofits, I went ahead and categorized these things into, you know, just four items. Okay, the first one is revenues. Okay, this is essentially the funds that allow our nonprofit to do exactly to carry out our mission. Right, allows us to take those funds and do what we do that makes our nonprofit who they are. So this comes in the form of donations, grants, and fees for services as well. So as we start thinking about items related to revenue, right? So some of our data points can be, you know, when the money came in, how much the money was, who it was exactly from, and just potential restrictions and potential categories that the money might actually fall into. So, you know, it's good to kind of keep account of the funds that are coming in and potential funds that are going to come in the future. And this is going to help our budgeting later on as well. The next pieces of data are operational expenses. Now, these are the things that kind of just keep our organization afloat, right? It comes in the form of rent, lease, agreements, utilities, marketing, payroll, inventory. So pretty much any item, any expense that allows us to run and operate our nonprofit will kind of fall under this category. So if you're maybe a brand new nonprofit, you might not have established, you know, let's say a home office, or you might not have invested in a lot of assets, or you know, you might not need to spend a lot on marketing, or maybe you have a few employees. So one of the things to understand is, what are my total expenses annually, monthly, etc. And the more information that we can collect, the better we'll be off. You know, the next thing is kind of keeping a track of sources of revenue in which that are donors directly. So one of the things we always talk about, and we're going to touch on this next week Thursday, this Thursday coming up for strategic fundraising, is that just managing donors. So this is really key. So we know that, you know, in the concept of fundraising, that we need to create donor profiles, and we need to just do a better job of just managing donors. But what does that actually mean from a record standpoint? So we know that when we account for revenue, you want to kind of track and manage donors. So by collecting just donation information, the source, the type, it goes a really long way of just assessing exactly who our donors are, how much money they're giving, and just allows us to collect information for potential uses for the future. For example, in the nonprofit world, the best idea of a fundraising plan is to see historical results or to take a look at historical donations, because that is a starting point, an assessment of essentially how the future fundraising plans and strategies will go. So one of the things that nonprofits have to do is just kind of understand how we get funded from a donor standpoint. So tracking and managing donors is a really big component of it. And last and certainly not least, the one of the main strongholds or foundations of any nonprofit is the volunteers, right? And so they are able to utilize their time and to help us fulfill the mission for our nonprofit. So one of the ways that we want to kind of manage this is to just track and manage volunteers. So, bits of information can include, their name, their, phone number, email, address, the hours that they plan to volunteer, and maybe the type of volunteering duties that they're interested in or they're potentially performing. So, recently I taught a class at the LeBeau College of Business, and our nonprofit client was the Special Olympics in Philadelphia. And one of the things that, we did a few surveys in which a student group kind of put together a survey, and one of the kind of concepts they understood or what they gathered was that people are interested in, similar to the gig economy, people are interested in volunteering their time and efforts for something that they're actually good at. Meaning that, if I'm a finance guy, and Kevin is a marketing genius, and Anne is really good at, from a legal standpoint, or she's a lawyer, people want to volunteer their time and efforts based on that, based on their talents and what their passions and interests are. So one of the ways to track volunteers might be the potential duties that the volunteer can actually perform. Even though you might have a set plan of exactly a volunteer plan of exactly what those volunteers will do. The concept of having a list of volunteers and their potential interests can go a long way, because every volunteer doesn't have to do the same thing. They could do something related to their passions, interests, career, aspirations, etc. So, collecting information on volunteers will allow us to not only manage them, but also potentially find new ones and find referrals that way as well. The way that records and data kind of flow into financial management is that, it just allows us to just see how our money is spent. The whole concept of stewardship and just reporting on it just allows us to say that if we're a nonprofit and we bring in $100,000 in donations for the fiscal year of, FY20, or for the calendar year of 2020, how have we utilized those funds, right? How much of it goes to salary? How much of it goes to direct program costs? How much of it goes to marketing? So the whole concept of financial management means that everybody in the nonprofit has an idea of how the money is spent. Every employee, every board member knows exactly where the money is being spent. So this financial management, it's essentially a cycle. And it starts out by accounting, which is essentially record keeping. Accounting is, really just a fancy way of record keeping, and it ensures that we have, good policies and processes in place. So one of the first things that we'll kind of talk about here is record keeping is a great way of internal policies in which that we come up with a process, whether you have a nonprofit that you're just starting and it's only 1 or 2 people, or an established nonprofit, which is maybe 20, 30 people, is what kind of policies do you have in place to record the things that are happening, right? So financial transactions, anytime cash goes in or out, how are you recording that? So record keeping is truly accounting. And this accounting and record keeping allows us to kind of get into the concept of reporting. Formally from a finance standpoint, there's essentially 3 statements that, are usually considered for nonprofits: is the operating statement, AKA your income statement, your balance sheet, and your cash flow statement. So the it's only because we keep good records and files, and we have good data collection policies, that we have the ability to even report on this. So this is a good starting point. And basic record keeping allows us to kind of just create reports. And that report can be published maybe on our website. Maybe it's created as a few slides that we present to all of our donors at the end of the year. But the biggest thing is we have the ability to report because we have the data for it. The other two things that allows us to utilize the data is analysis and planning. So analysis actually allows us to sit back and say, well, this is what we utilize the money for. This is essentially the trend that we're looking at. For example, if Kevin and Ann are tracking marketing expenses, and maybe they believe that spending a few dollars on a specific software or a premium social media account would allow to generate more leads that allow us to generate more donations. Well, do we have the stats and metrics to back that up, right? So kind of like a return on investment. If we're spending, let's say, $1,000 a year on a specific tool that's supposed to create donor engagement or is supposed to increase volunteers, do we have the data to back that up? For example, we spent $1,000 and it led to an additional $20,000 in donations and maybe an additional 200 people volunteering. That we can say that definitely has a good ROI, return on investment. So one of the things that the availability on data allows us to do is just to do some analysis to compare stats, whether it's quarterly, monthly, or just from an annual standpoint, depending on how old your nonprofit might be. And last but not least, the main reason we love data, and as it pertains to financial management, is we have the ability for budgeting and planning. So as we kind of plan and budget our next year's operations, we have the ability to take all the information that we have, the raw data, the reporting. After doing some analysis, we have the ability to say, okay, I think that it's time to open up a new location. I think it's time to hire another full-time employee. I think it's important to get 20 more volunteers. So this is the full financial management cycle in which that we collect data, we report it, we kind of do our own analysis of it, and then we plan for the future. And this cycle just keeps going around and around. And all these four components are truly important to the world of financial management. And so moving on, so you're like, okay, this is great, JT. But how do I keep track of all these things? Well, if you are a larger company, you have something called the ERP. And essentially, it's a business process management software that allows the company to kind of integrate all the things they do in their operations, just all in one place. And you're like, wow, an ERP sounds great, JT. How much does it cost? Well, the installation and implementation of some of these softwares can cost up to well over $1 million. And usually ERPs are utilized by large, Fortune 500 companies and, smaller companies just to streamline and to make things more efficient. And you're like, okay, what are some accounting systems that I may have access to? Well, standard accounting systems can include SAP, BlackLine, QuickBooks, Sage, etc. And there's actually paid nonprofit software out there too, called Adaptive Planning, SparkRock, Every Action, and Donor Perfect. And you're looking at some of these items, and if you do a few Google searches, you can kind of see some price points for that. And this can all be eternal, right? And we have the ability, and these systems are great. Some of the ones listed here, they're really great. They're really validated by the business world and both the nonprofit world as well, and they have great reviews. But the story now becomes, if I'm a smaller nonprofit, how can I implement the financial management plan and do those four things you said, JT, without any resources or with a limited view of it? And I want to tell you guys a story. So in addition to teaching, nonprofit courses, my other passion is really working on cars. And I want to introduce you to guys to two things here. And I call this the tale of two wrenches. And so on one side, you have a standard socket wrench, also called a ratchet. And on the other side, you have, on the right side, you have an impact wrench. So just to give you guys some background on it, right? So I started working on cars in high school when I first got my car, and I've been working on cars and motorcycles ever since. And one of the things I really understood was it's more about knowledge than the actual tools itself. So to do an oil change or to change a tire, you can actually you can use both tools to get it done. The impact wrench that you guys see on the right side is essentially what well-established mechanics and maybe enthusiasts utilize to kind of take off maybe a lug nut or to take off some sort of bolt on their car. But the truth of the matter is that it can be achieved with a socket wrench as well. It might just require a little bit more power and a little bit more effort, or as we say in the car world, a little bit more elbow grease, but it both can be done. And this is kind of the concept of what nonprofits are facing, right? There's two tools to help them do both, to achieve the concept of record keeping. And sometimes we feel like we have to invest in something a little bit more to get actual results. But the truth is, all you really need is a socket wrench. By using this ratchet, you can do pretty much same car repairs and car maintenance that you can with an impact wrench. And so a cost difference might be you could buy a good quality socket wrench for maybe $20, $30, $40. A good impact wrench will cost you about $300 to $400. And so one of the things I want to kind of introduce is the concept that just because you don't have the tools or you don't have the funding doesn't mean you can still do an effective job for your nonprofit. And so I want to kind of introduce you guys to the socket wrench. It's Microsoft Excel. And by using a simple spreadsheet tool such as Microsoft Excel, we have the ability to do the same things that a larger software application allows us to do. But the only difference here is it just maybe takes a little bit more effort on our part, a little bit more elbow grease. But the story here is we have the same ability to get the same results. And so a little bit more about Microsoft Excel. Maybe you heard of it. It's the most popular spreadsheet tool in the world. And the great thing about Microsoft Excel is stores, organizes, and calculates data. We have the ability to create and build custom reports and visuals. And so I'm going to be sharing a little template that I created, and I think Kevin will be sending out this later on after the session is done. And I just want to remind everyone that just, you don't need a fancy accounting software tool or anything like that. You just want to be good stewards of the information that your nonprofit collects and records. And I just want to remind everyone, especially coming from an accounting background, that, many years ago, accounting was just done with pen and paper. There's these things called ledger books, and these people were so crazy, they actually took a pen and wrote things down. I know it's crazy. And that's essentially what they did. And guess what? Companies still thrived. Organizations still got their, whatever they need to do done. And, there wasn't a lot of errors. Now, with the concept of technology, it allows us to kind of do the same thing, except it allows us to just kind of just utilize this a lot better, right? This is a lot better than an actual ledger itself. And so we have the ability to do that. So how can I set up Microsoft Excel in a way that can kind of complement my organization? So one of the first things I'll do is I'll kind of go through a few slides that show you guys, and then we'll take a look at the actual template that I created. And I just want to remind everyone, it is truly a sample template. It is no way it means like the best template that you can ever get in Microsoft Excel, but it is a great starting point, or it helps us to kind of become disciplined in recording and understanding and reflecting on the data that we collect. So if you're new to Microsoft Excel files are referred to as workbooks. If the file that Kevin will send out is referred to a workbook. And the good thing about these workbooks is that within the workbooks, there are multiple worksheets. Each page or tab within a workbook contains its own individual data. If you open up a blank Microsoft Excel file right now, you're probably going to have sheet 1, 2, and 3 as the default. And one of the things we'll kind of understand is how we have the ability to separate data and record points into each specific worksheet. And then the whole concept is to kind of just summarize everything into one at the end through a series of just formula links. And so one of the things I want to kind kind of bring your attention to is the type of information that we'll actually collect. So you're like, okay, now you're telling us that we can achieve the same results in Excel if we just set it up properly, or if we just kind of put some extra elbow grease into it. So one of the things I want to kind of just, from a data collection standpoint, is that we're going to create an Excel file and we're going to set it up as so. We're just going to use simple headers and column information to just set our data points up. From a revenue standpoint, maybe we'll give the date, the amount, the revenue source, and the exact revenue type that it is. From an expense standpoint, we'll kind of reflect on when it happened, the amount, and just the expense type. For donors, we're going to keep it really simple. We're going to keep when the donation was made, the amount, the donor name, and potential classification of that, because I know every nonprofit, depending on the size, may have a very specific classification. You might label them a lifetime member, or maybe a one-time participant, etc. And for volunteers, we want to maybe kind of jot down exactly when they volunteered, their name, what they did, and just total hours volunteered. And one of the good things about this template is that you can kind of make it your own. Maybe we're taking away some of these data points, or just adding more on, because we all understand every nonprofit is truly unique. So one of the things I'm going to do now is I'm going to kind of share that Excel file with you. So I have it up right now. So let me just stop sharing here and share that workbook. All right, so I'm going to stop share here. You guys can see my face now. So you don't have to see my face any longer. I'm going to share the Excel file, or you can see my face in the smaller way. That's better. So right now, I created this very basic template, and I just want to remind everyone, it is truly just a simple model to inspire potentially anybody on today to just kind of make something of their own, that it really doesn't take a lot to build something upon this. So here I have just a quick summary page of saying, here are my revenues, here are my expenses, increase, decrease in net assets. So in the world of nonprofits and accounting, we often say that, rather than saying net income, it's really net assets. How much more money do we have than our actual expenses? This tracks donations and maybe total volunteered hours. One of the concepts I want to kind of produce is that every organization will kind of determine when they need to create something like this. For example, your nonprofit might be interested in kind of having this as just an annual file. So I have the FY20 summary, but depending on the size and the nature of your nonprofit, you might go on to say that, well, JT, I need a little bit more information, and we have a lot of data that we'll be collecting. So I think it's best that I require my organization to do something monthly or quarterly. So, the concept will vary according to, the nature of that. So I just want to cover kind of just exactly how this file looks like, and how potentially, you yourself can build something like that. So the first tab I'm going to go to is the summary page that we're here now. And if you kind of look on it, it's just formula links here. And these formulas just link to, just the revenue, expenses, donations, and volunteers. So here I have a total of 5 sheets. First is a summary sheet, and the remaining 4 sheets actually collect my data. So I'm going to go and click on revenues here, and you could just see it. So this is something very basic. All this has is that we have this hypothetical character called Bobby, and he donated, $2,000 to our organization. And what I have here in column, in cell H1, is just a running total of all of column D that says anytime somebody donates maybe another $2,000 here, it's updated to 4,000. And this just allows us to kind of just see the total on the top. So this is just for me to just collect the information in Microsoft Excel from a very basic standpoint. And the expenses work the same exact way. Here I have the date, the expense type, the notes, and the amount, and have the running total for the year. So for example, if you're doing this for the month of January, the expenses in January was obviously that rent payment that was due for $600, as well as some poster printing at Staples for 3 posters. But I just want to remind you, wear a mask if you're planning to go to Staples at this time. So obviously our marketing expenses here were about $60, but I mean, this is just a simple way. And as an organization, you might require a little bit more stricter expense type category, meaning that rather than just saying the word rent and marketing, you have the ability to kind of like, drill down on it and say exactly what kind of marketing expense. So you can say something like, well, this is not really marketing, it's marketing dash printing. And so you can update your file accordingly to match the expense type that you want to collect. So this usually is determinant of the size of your organization and the amount of transactions that you do maybe within a given period. The next thing I want to point out to is donations. And the donations is just kind of like that revenue that we got. So essentially donations and revenues essentially go hand in hand, but maybe your donations tab or sheet will allow us to collect a little bit more data. For example, you might have the donation type in which that, sure, you got $2,000 from Bobby. What kind of donation is it, right? Does he represent an organization? Does he, represent, just somebody, that wanted to donate? So obviously, Bobby seems like an individual here based on the donation type. And maybe we have assigned levels. And this is something that's probably unique to your organization as well. Maybe you have a very specific donor level type. Level 1 might be your most basic donor. Level 2 might be a more reoccurring donor. And maybe level 3 might be just reserved for institutions and foundations that maybe provide gifts over $5,000 or whatever the limit that your organization wants to set. So this is just a file that allows us to just collect data. And last but not least, volunteers. Here you have the date, the volunteer name, your task, notes, hours, and running total for the year. So once again, this is just a good concept of kind of managing your volunteers in a way that to make sure they're doing exactly what's needed, and potentially just comb through this historical data to get a better understanding of. For example, we logged in the system that Lisa, she's part of Drexel's nonprofit management program, was able to work on some social media and marketing tasks, and she spent about 4 hours on it. Whether it's Lisa self-reported this information or you deemed that was a scheduled time, you have the ability to kind of track this information. And so while this really isn't a comprehensive program to, collect those stats and, that, potentially accounting programs and, those enterprise resource programs allows us to kind of collect, this is still something. This is still a socket wrench. This allows us to kind of at least build a good discipline and create some procedures on how to do that. So whether it requires you yourself, the sole operator of the nonprofit, to fill out this information, or maybe you have a few people in your organization that you're saving the file for the end of the month and you're asking people to fill this out. I think this is a good starting point to just kind of understand your nonprofit's needs, and also when to determine if you need something more than Excel, because Excel is truly the baseline, I believe. Using some sort of word processing tool or Microsoft Excel is truly just a starting point for a nonprofit, but it allows us to kind of understand the types of data that we want to collect. You might look at some of these things and you're like, okay, I would like to collect that, but I would need an extra column added to kind of jot down very specific information that's important to my nonprofit. So I'm going to stop sharing this Excel file. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go back to the slides and just kind of wrap things up. Not wrap things up, but just cover the remaining things and then potentially take any questions. I think I talk really fast, so I apologize for that. So just finish off the presentation and take some questions. So we kind of took a look at that Excel file. And now we want to kind of see our additional resources. So one of the things a lot of people might ask is, well, do you have to be an Excel expert to kind of utilize Excel? Absolutely not. Excel is a really simple tool. It allows us, allows us to calculate some basic data. So essentially the only real function or formula that we're essentially running in Microsoft Excel is just a sum function. And that sum function just allows us to add some stuff up in Excel. So it really doesn't require heavy hands-on Excel work, but just a basic understanding of Excel. And I think there are plenty of free resources out there in the form of additional templates and some free Microsoft training videos on Excel to learn a little bit more about Excel if you're truly interested. But one of the things I do want to point out is some free resources for nonprofits and small businesses here. And the reason I say small businesses is because a lot of these companies do tailor to smaller organizations, whether it be a nonprofit or a small business. So I do want to point that out. So one of the things is NP Treasurer. So it provides free accounting software for nonprofits. Another option is Front Accounting, and it actually provides not only accounting software, but also ERP software. So it allows you to kind of track other metrics as well, such as employees, volunteers, etc. And also GNU Cash is a great resource. It provides free accounting software for personal use or small businesses. So I just want to let you guys know that these resources do not require you to spend any money. And so one of the things that you might have to kind of keep in mind is just understand what is best for you and your organization. I really think that the use of Excel is underrated when assessing these things. I think that all nonprofits should begin with a simple Excel chart or Excel file and just assess, here are all the data collection points, and then determine on your own when you need something a little bit more. So for example, in tying back this whole story with the story of the wrenches, is that as I start getting into cars, I had family members and my parents and aunts and uncles and nieces and nephews asking me, can I work on their car? So I did invest in getting an impact wrench, or that tool that your mechanic uses, and I did spend that much money, even though the wife wasn't quite happy on that. But one of the things I was able to do is just be more efficient in using that, because I realized I was doing that much more car work or something like that, or maybe I was able to afford that. So one of the things that your organization has to do is kind of assess what your options should be, because I think every one of us here might be in a different situation for your nonprofit, meaning that the first thing is kind of assess current process, right? How does your organization collect data, store data, view data, report on data? And that determination might be, hey, JT, I already utilize Microsoft Excel, or I just, I use a simple journal book, a ledger book, and you know what, all my numbers tie, to the exact penny, and I had no issues. And the second thing you should do is kind of anticipate future growth and volume. For example, if you are running a nonprofit, or you're part of a nonprofit that is in a growth stage, or you realize your organization and operations are growing, then you might realize that Microsoft Excel may not be the best tool because of the amount of employees that you have, and for all the users to access a simple file can get a little too much. I think this is how organizations grow. They realize they need better tools. So you might realize that you need that impact wrench, and that socket wrench is no longer working out for you. The next thing is just understanding reporting needs. So, as you report externally to your stakeholders through maybe an annual report, a monthly report, maybe a dashboard, or maybe simply a website that you frequently update, you have to understand what are my reporting needs? Like, what kind of information do I need to report? And this is when maybe Excel, just simply using Excel might not cutting it, because you might need some more automated features, simply because you realize you're not as efficient. And you want to kind of analyze available options. So in kind of taking a look at your current process and determining your needs and anticipating future growth, you might need to analyze the available options, which is one, obviously Microsoft Excel, your assumed free option, or the previous slide that I presented on the concept of free resources for nonprofits. There are also additional web templates out there as well. They're a little bit more complicated. That's why I did link those here. But I would recommend that everybody kind of checks out. If I can go back a slide, check out these options. And one of the things I want to remind everyone is just kind of understand the features of each specific program and make sure you're comfortable with it. Because I do want to remind everyone, because it is free accounting software, that sometimes there's data privacy issues, so make sure you guys read it. Overall, these three options are really good. These are well-established companies and organizations that really have highly rated reviews. So I would definitely recommend that you guys do your research, read as many reviews as possible before making a final call on that. And so analyze your options and select from the best option for your nonprofit. That's the last step. That's only you, who, as you're running the nonprofit, or if you are, in a leadership position within the nonprofit, or you're a board member of that nonprofit, only you can just kind of understand exactly what your organization actually needs. So, just understanding your options and making the best choice. And I think that this whole process, these steps should be analyzed almost annually or frequently, just to understand, are we doing the best we can to collect the best information that helps us make choices and things like that. So it's just being honest with yourself, because because one of the things that back in the day, we just kept those records on ledger books, and we used debits and credits on pieces of paper, on chart paper, and guess what? Business still got done. Our operations were great. Businesses, nonprofits, all organizations was able to achieve what they wanted to achieve just from simple pen and paper. So that now the fact that we have a spreadsheet tool makes our life a lot easier. And then one step up from that would be some sort of automated reporting tool or record keeping tool that we need. So honestly, it's up to you to determine that, because every organization is truly different. And before I end, I want to leave you guys with this quote before I show you guys my contact information on the next slide. Is that the co-founder of Twitter said, even the simplest tools can empower people to do great things. So one of the things to keep in mind is that it's not really the tool, it's the user itself, because a great mechanic can use a socket wrench and still get the job done, while someone like me who thinks they're a mechanic can kind of destroy things with a power tool. So, one of the biggest takeaways from this session should be just the questioning of the data and the type of records that we collect for nonprofits, and just assess, are we collecting it the right way, and are there tools that we can invest in or even learn more about to better our nonprofit. So with that being said, before I take questions, I want to thank everybody for attending. My contact information is here, jt365@drexel.edu. And my LinkedIn profile is also here as well. That is the only social media account that I have. LinkedIn, I guess it would be considered a social media account. So feel free to connect on here if you have any questions, because I know, you might have a very specific question that is unique to your nonprofit, or your nonprofit is going through maybe a growth stage and you're concerned about how you collect information. So I would be happy to connect with you and take any take any questions you might have in the event that you're not able to ask questions now. So I'm going to temporarily stop sharing here. And I guess I will open up the chat lines, or to potentially ask to take any questions. So,
thanks a lot, JT. What I want to do for the Q&A session is the better way, I think, to kind of track them is if everybody can type their questions into the group chat. That way we can follow them in line, and I don't have to scan across and see who's trying to raise their hand. But while we're waiting for people to think about some of the questions they want to ask, I want to kind of go back and ask you some questions about one of the things you talked about.
Sure.
And I want to bring this up because I think from your experience, I want other people to get a better sense of what does it mean to anticipate future growth? What's realistic in your mind? And I say that because I've been in situations where people are saying, you know what, we can grow our donorship or our revenue by 50, 75%. And rather than build up, unrealistic expectations, do you have a way by which a standard by which you think people should start projecting their growth?
I think the COVID-19 situation has thrown a wrench in everyone's plan. So that financial management cycle that I showed in the slides, it's like somebody took a few socket wrenches and threw all of them at that cycle, because even larger organizations such as University of Pennsylvania and even in Drexel, we are, and Andy can attest to this as well, is that we're facing a situation, a financial situation that really impacts everybody. So even as organizations like Drexel and Penn as we kind of take a look at some of our programs that are funded through donations and gifts, it is truly challenging. So I think that, you know, Kevin, to your question, I think you need an honest reflection of what's considered practical in this situation, because the financial impact of it really affects everybody. It's not just one person of any income level. It just affects everybody as a whole. So I think the guidance that we got from, from a corporate view standpoint is that, they're saying that expect, 1/3 less the donations, you know, but I mean, Kevin, that number is really subjective as well. So one of the things I would kind of encourage everyone is kind of take a look at your history of your donations to your respective nonprofits, and make an assessment of what is considered a good estimate. And I would say be as conservative as possible. I always been an optimistic person, but it's always good from a budgeting standpoint to be conservative as possible. And in terms of the volume growth,
Can I interrupt in just 1 second, JT?
Sure.
Just as those of you who have attended the sessions that I've run, that I sit on the board for WEPAC, the West Philadelphia Alliance for Children. And, one thing that really surprised us is actually our foundation giving or donations to us from foundations has gone up from COVID. So you can't always assume that it's going to go down. I think it is fairer to assume that maybe individual donations may go down, but you have to just really look at the situation and communicate with your larger donors, especially those that are more corporate or foundation based. So just wanted to add that little piece in.
And we need that type of optimism right now, as I tell everyone to cut their estimates, and really makes a good point. I think, a good thing about record keeping is the concept of communication and just reaching out to, potential donors and those who have made a pledge, and just ask them, hey, I understand the COVID situation really impacts all, but, just communicate with them on, the status of the potential donation or their gifts. I think that's really huge. And I want to touch on the other question or a part of that question is anticipating volume. It also, the concept of volume doesn't mean that you're simply getting more money. It means that your organization is simply doing more from a transactional standpoint. So as, for example, you can anticipate maybe $100,000 extra in a gift from a foundation, as Ann mentioned. But what if that's coming in the form of smaller gifts from maybe 100 different people that are donating $1,000 each? That means you have 1,000 or 100 record lines. So just anticipating your volume growth to record the items that you need to do. Or for example, you're engaging in a new program for your nonprofit, and you realize that this program really requires a lot of things and a lot of various different expenses. So simply jotting down your expenses in Excel file might not cut it. So that kind of allows you to, just understand how much volume is being utilized within the organization. So volume can also mean the amount of records that your organization is currently responsible for.
Great. Thanks a lot. And are there any other questions that anybody want to ask? Here we go. Are the courses on how to use Excel? While I use it for household budgets, I always have trouble with the formulas and have a formula go from one workbook to another. Any recommendations for a simple Excel class on record keeping using formulas is helpful? I tell you what, I'll answer that question, because one of the things that we do at the Beachell Family Learning Center is I teach the Excel classes. So, and everything that JT just showed you is easy to set up, and you're right. If you understand how to set up the pivot table by referencing formulas from one workbook to another, you're doing good. So once you, like he was saying, you have some very basic formulas. The first thing I want to tell you to do, and this is easy enough for me to do, when I set up the next Excel class, which for those of you who are interested, we will be having, I apologize for the phone in the background. We will be having an Excel class that will be starting either in August or September. It's going to be the whole series of Microsoft classes that we're going to be transitioning to be online. And so if that's an area that you want to focus on in terms of how you want to develop it, because I do everything according to capstone projects. So if your project is to set up your accounting to be used in Excel, then I can absolutely help you get that done. So that's going to be easy enough to do. So Cecilia, just reach back out to me afterwards and we'll talk about how we can get you set up. All right, any other questions? Okay, we have a few more minutes, so I'm going to fill in and ask another question. Could you do me a favor? Can you go back to the presentation on the page that you had the different free software? Because
Sure.
if you could, because you had 2 free softwares and you had the ERP platform, but
Yep.
talk to us a little bit about the free software. How are they? And one is specific for nonprofits, the NP Treasurer.
Yeah, so the NP Treasurer was more of the popular one that kept coming up in the research process. And even if you go on that website, they kind of tailor it to smaller nonprofits, student groups, organizational groups, community athletic organizations and things of that nature. And it really got great reviews. And I think in kind of looking at the reviews, they were talking about how user friendly it is. And my recommendation is, if it's free, check it out. Download it, play around with it, take a look at some of the tutorials they have, and I think these organizations are really good at providing the training as well. Obviously, when I mean training, I mean free tutorial videos, directions, procedures, etc. On providing that. So that's always a great start. So I would kind of just analyze each one, and to be honest, if it's free and you have a decent computer to install that in, I would say go for it, just playing around with it, because I think this is the ultimate thing of just checking out your additional resources. Because one of the things that's always going to happen is that just simply one person is not going to be responsible for record keeping, and in accounting we call that really that's pretty scary, right? From an internal controls process, if you only have one person controlling all the financial data, that is a problem. So as you require additional users, I think this is going to be a great tool.
Great.
And Cecilia, it does, some of them does include payroll management as well. So that would be a good tool to check out. I think GNU Cash definitely has that, and same thing with front accounting as well. So, and by the way, this is that link here on the bottom, or I think you guys can Google this as well, will allow you to find additional ones. These are just the 3 ones that I kind of did a little bit of research on and based on the reviews, but there are also additional ones out there as well. Not only in the link, but obviously on, through a few Google searches will allow you to get that too.
And just for the record, JT, I'm actually one of those people that was around doing accounting before they came up with accounting software. So I learned how to do it on, spreadsheets and ledgers well before the free accounting software came out. So, and you're right, business continued to go on. And I like the idea of you talking about practical, either low cost or no cost solutions that people should be incorporating into, not just in how they build their organization, but how they may be starting their organization and making sure they have processes and record keeping in place.
I would even go on to say that just if you can first set up all your data and record needs in Excel first, and then talk about additional new resources, I think that would be the best way. Because once you actually map out the information that you collect and just understand it better, then you'll really understand, I actually need, payroll, as the question was asked. So people actually determine what's actually needed. So it's always a good first step,
Absolutely. Okay, we're 3 minutes from winding it up. So I don't have any more questions. What about you guys? Questions going once, questions going twice. Okay, so as we wrap up this session, our final session will be this coming Thursday. which JT will be presenting that session as well. So you guys will be getting, after this session, you guys will be getting the registration link for that session. And we will be looking forward to seeing you guys at our last session. Any final words from anybody? All right. JT, I want to say thank you very much. It was really good having you here, and I'm looking forward to you doing the next session on Thursday.
Great. Thank you for having me. Thank you, Kevin. Thank you, Ann, for setting all this up.
Thank you,
Great.
JT. Great.
All right. You guys take care and have a good afternoon. And I hope you guys keep your electricity. All right.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Take care.